I'm really excited to introduce our panelists to you. We have Ruth Amos. Ruth is a licensed clinical mental health counselor supervisor. She's been in private practice since 2006. She focuses on perinatal mood challenges, grief, loss, life balance, self-care, infertility. And I have met Ruth because she helps volunteer with my program, and she's one of our professional advisors. Topic of grief, and we're going to let Ruth kind of take it away on this topic. And I think maybe just, Ruth, if you don't mind, just starting with why are we even talking about this, right? Because some people might be surprised that this is a slide.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Megan. And hey, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. I am going to start our conversation talking about grief. And a lot of times people associate grief with the death of someone, but grief actually refers to a loss of something. And what we are all dealing with right now is a collective loss of the world we knew. We've lost our routines. We've lost our ability to gather. We've lost our ability to cheer our kids on in their activities. There have been economic losses, and that is just a handful of some of the things that we have lost since this pandemic began. So I'm going to talk a little bit about grief in relation to what we're going through right now, and especially about how our children might be experiencing it too, and then sort of how we can try to cope with that. And again, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on that as I'm talking, or you can ask them after I'm done. So again, I said grief is the collective loss of something, and we are in a position right now where our world has kind of been turned upside down. We don't recognize a lot of things that we used to have that were very normal. We've lost a sense of safety. You know, going to the grocery store today is very different from 2 months ago. It doesn't even feel safe right now. And if you look at the slide, it talks about the stages of grief. And I don't want to get too technical into detail, but I sort of want to talk about what I think our experience has been since this all started. You know, the first couple of weeks, we were kind of like all running on adrenaline. It was like, okay, we're going to stay at home for 2 weeks. We're going to quarantine. We're going to social distance, and then we're going to be good, right? We kind of all thought this is what this path is going to look like. And so we, you know, figured out how to work from home. We figured out how to set up our children to learn at home, how we were going to teach our children at home. And it felt like, okay, we've got this. And what I started to notice kind of into week 3, week 4, there was this dip that happened. It was like the fatigue set in. We realized this was going to go on a lot longer than we initially thought. And to quote one of my good friends who I think is listening tonight, we talked shortly after schools kind of expanded their closure. And she said, you know, last week there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And this week that light has turned out. And I like that imagery because I think that speaks to here we were doing great, and now we're here. And we don't know how long this is going to go on. How are we going to sustain this new normal we've had to create for ourselves? So I think it's important to acknowledge that that is what has happened, and we can still, you know, come back up with the adrenaline, but we may also have the dips again. So to know that this is not a stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're done. We're going to fluctuate and go back and forth. And that's just normal. That's to be expected. So I'm going to talk a little bit too about our kids, because as much as we are grieving, so are our children, but their grief looks different from ours. So we as adults are really good at keeping our stress in the forefront and letting it affect everything that we do in our lives. Our kids aren't like that. Kids do what we call touching in and out with their grief. So for example, you know, you may notice your children are happy-go-lucky, doing their thing, playing outside, playing their video games, and all of a sudden there may be a comment or a question or an outburst or a regressive behavior. And that is their way of expressing there's some really tough feelings going on inside. And they don't always know how to describe it. They don't always know how to name it, but that is how they can express it. And it is important for us to be mindful of that, because I can honestly say we've had meltdowns in our house, and I've had to think about my response, which wasn't always appropriate. And in hindsight, realize my kids are struggling with this. Their routine is gone. They're not seeing their friends. They're missing their activities. So reminding ourselves that our kids are grieving as well is really important in how we maybe respond to them. And we'll kind of get into that, I think, maybe with Hillary's talk later on. So I think it's important also that we sort of check in with our families, whether it's once a week or several times a week, just sitting down and saying, how's everybody doing? How's everybody feeling? Do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? And parents, I know that boy, do we try to protect our kids. We don't want them to experience hard feelings. We don't want them to be upset. But this is actually an opportunity for us to role model, how do we talk about feelings? I'll have parents say to me, well, I don't let my kids see me upset. I just go in my room and cry and get it out, and then I come back. And 9 times out of 10, the kids know what is going on. So it's kind of hard to hide that. I encourage you, if you're having a bad day, say, I'm really sad today. I miss seeing grandma and grandpa, because what that does for the kids is it gives them permission to talk about how they feel and recognize that it's okay to have those feelings. So as hard as it may be to be vulnerable, it's actually a chance to say, it's okay to feel what you feel, and let me help you name it. Someone was asking, do we ask children how they're doing every day? I don't think every day is necessary. If you're concerned about one of your children, certainly, but I think just sort of having an intentional once or twice a week, maybe sit down around the table and just chat with each other, check in, and see how everybody's doing. So remembering that this is your chance to role model and kind of help your kids with that. The other thing is we also struggle with telling our kids when we don't know the answer to something. And there are so many unknowns right now. We are, you see the term anticipatory grief there on the slide. That is the worry about what is to come. And we don't know what our future looks like right now. We're all kind of taking this day by day, which is what we should do. But we don't know, if our kids say, when do we go back to school? When am I going to see my friends? It's okay to say, I don't know. And to not put the pressure on yourself to feel like I have to have an answer for them. You can say, I don't know. And you can say, but we're going to get through this together, kind of give them that reassurance that everything's going to be okay. Because I think we're going to start talking in our world about, remember what life was like pre-pandemic. We kind of did that with 9/11. Remember what the world was like pre 9/11. I think this is going to be another moment where life is going to be different. And we don't know what to expect, but taking it day by day and talking about it together as a family is going to be helpful in helping the kids to cope with that part as well.
Thank you, Ruth. Are there if anybody have questions about any of that?
There's one question, let's see.
Okay.
If a child doesn't have language to express their feelings right now, how can we engage them in those check-ins? Talking about a 3-year-old. And yeah, with younger kids, it is a little bit harder because naming feelings does become difficult. But a lot of times using books. So there's some books that you can get on Amazon, and I don't know if Megan, we can later provide some resources about that, but that helps kids to understand what feelings are and how to name them. But I think just having them exposed to those conversations as well, they can learn from you when they hear you speaking about it, kind of that's educating them on feelings the same way that a book might.
And just to piggyback, Ruth, on what you're saying there, with the really little ones, even as young as, 1-year-olds and even babies, we really just want to acknowledge and allow space for feelings. So you don't even have to necessarily know the right name. But if you can tell that they're upset, like, wow, I hear you. You seem really upset right now, right? That's enough sometimes. And just let it breathe. Just remember that. And we'll get into this with my section, but you don't have to fix the feeling. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to have the perfect words, but just acknowledge. Have that be your mantra. So when she says, I'm sad at the virus, I hear you, you're sad. And then it's okay to be sad, right? So just letting that be what it is. take the pressure off yourself to fix it.
And one last thing I wanted to say is it's important that we don't compare our experience, because boy, aren't we good as parents and moms to like compare ourselves to everybody else. And so recognize that what you're going through is valid. And I hear a lot, you know, well, so-and-so has it worse. Well, your loss is your loss, and your feelings are your feelings, and you have to honor them and acknowledge them. And so try not to compare your situation to someone else, and also don't judge how other people are dealing with this. I think compassion for ourselves and each other is one of the key things we have to get through this right now.